The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and unspoken grievances. Jason Harper stood at the tabletop, his tie slightly askew and his eyes glued to the phone, as if he was trying to hide from the reality around him. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, illuminating the dust particles in the air, and only the hum of the coffee maker broke the tense silence. Across the kitchen, Emily Harper was struggling with a jar of strawberry jam, her cheekbones tense, her movements jerky. Their children, Mia, 10, and Ethan, 7, were sitting at the table arguing over the last blueberry muffin. "Mom, he's kicking me under the table," Mia whined, throwing an angry look at her brother. "It's not true," Ethan snapped, his mouth full, crumbs spilling onto the table. "That's enough," Emily snapped, slamming the can onto the countertop. The glass tinkled and everyone froze for half a second. She took a deep breath, putting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just eat, okay? We're late." Jason didn't look up from his phone. He flipped through an email from his boss about quarterly goals, thumb scrolling across the screen. Another day, another routine. He barely noticed Emily's tone, that sharp edge that hadn't been there a couple of years ago. Or there was, but he stopped noticing it. "Jason," Emily's voice was quiet, but prickly. "Can you help? At least a little." He looked up, blinking as if surprised to find himself in his own kitchen. "What?" "Yes, sure." He put the phone down and took a knife, cutting the muffin in half and handing a piece to each child. "Here, problem solved." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not what I meant." He raised an eyebrow, already half distracted by the new notification on his phone. "Then what, Em? I'm trying to get myself together. We have a meeting with a client at 10. She turned away, yanking open the refrigerator to take out the orange juice. "Forget. Just go." Mia and Ethan looked at each other, that look that children get when they sense a storm coming. They began to eat faster, keeping their heads down as the air in the room grew heavier. Jason Harper was 38 and reliable. He worked in sales for 12 years, rising just enough to afford a 3-bedroom house in a nice suburb of Chicago. Tall, with the figure of a former high school football player who hadn't been to the gym for 10 years. Brown hair began to thin at the temples, and a quiet fatigue showed in Hazel's eyes. He loved his family, no question, but lately it seemed like he was running down a path that was getting faster and faster. Work, bills, kids' schedules, there's always something. And Emily became more complicated. Emily Harper, 36, taught psychology at a local college. She was the woman people called vivacious brown eyes, a warm smile, a mop of dark hair, usually pulled back into a messy bun. But lately she felt like she was drowning. Everyday life, children, endless to-do lists, all this was suffocating. She loved Jason, but his aloofness, his habit of withdrawing into himself, drove her crazy. She wanted him to see her so that they would talk as before, but each conversation ended either in silence or in her scream. "Can you even hear me?" Emily put the juice on the table with such a knock that the children froze again. Jason, who had already picked up the phone, looked up. I hear. But what do you want me to do? I solve problems as best I can." His tone was even, but there was an air of irritation in it, as if he was tired of repeating the same thing. "You don't decide, Jason. You're just putting everything on me." Her voice broke, and she immediately regretted it, glancing at the children. Mia stared at her plate while Ethan picked at the muffin, pretending nothing was happening. "It's not fair," Jason said, lowering his voice. "I work so that we have everything. You know how hard it is in the office now. Do you know how hard it is here?" She waved her hand, pointing to the kitchen, to the scattered crumbs, to the school backpacks piled by the door. "I'm not your secretary, Jason. I can't do everything alone." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'm not saying you should. But damn, just give me a second to." "Just a second," she interrupted, her eyes flashing. "You always have a second for the phone, for work, for everything except us." Jason opened his mouth to respond, but thought better of it. He clenched his jaw, his gaze growing colder. "Okay, I have to go." He grabbed the keys and briefcase, throwing them over his shoulder. "See you in the evening." The door slammed, and Emily was left standing in the middle of the kitchen, feeling her heart pounding. She hated it when he left like that. She hated that he closed himself off, leaving her alone to deal with this chaos. But most of all, she hated that she screamed, although she promised herself not to break down. "Mom, we'll be late," Mia said quietly, looking at her with concern. Emily nodded, smiling forcefully. "Yes, honey, get ready." By evening, the house was quieter, but the tension had not gone away. The kids were doing their homework in the living room, and Emily was making dinner spaghetti with sauce from a jar, nothing special. She heard the front door open, and her heart sank. Jason walked in, loosening his tie, his face tired but closed, as if he was wearing armor. "Hi," he said, throwing his briefcase on the sofa. "Hello," she answered without turning around, stirring the sauce. He paused, as if about to say something, but instead took a beer from the refrigerator and sat down at the table. Silence hung, heavy as a wet blanket. Emily felt irritation boiling inside her, but she tried to control herself. "How was your day?" he finally asked, but there was no real interest in his voice. "Fine," she snapped. "And you?" "Shit," he answered honestly, taking a sip of beer. The client lost his temper. The boss is on edge. An ordinary day. She nodded, not knowing what to say. She wanted to ask why he couldn't just talk to her, why he was always so distant. But instead she said, "Dinner will be here soon." He muttered something in response, and they fell silent again. Emily felt like something was breaking inside, as if their life was glass covered in cracks, and one more blow would break everything. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Emily sat on the sofa with a glass of wine, staring at the TV, where some pointless series was playing. Jason came out of the shower, wearing an old t-shirt and shorts, and sat next to him, but not too close. She felt his presence, but there was a gulf between them. "We need to talk," she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. He looked at her, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. "About what?" "About us, Jason. About what's happening." She turned to him, her eyes shining with fatigue and something else pain, maybe. "I can't do this anymore. We don't talk. We simply exist." He sighed, leaning back on the couch. I don't know what you want to hear. I'm trying. I really try." "Are you trying?" Her voice trembled. "You don't even notice how I'm drowning. I feel invisible in this house." "It's not fair," he said, his tone sharper. "I work for us. For the sake of the children. Do you think it's easy for me? Do you think it's easy for me?" She put the glass on the table, her hands trembling. "I'm not just a mom, Jason. I'm not just a housewife. I'm human, and I need you to see this." He looked at her, and something flashed in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or understanding. But he didn't know what to say. He never knew what to say. "Maybe," she began, her voice becoming quieter, "maybe we should contact someone. To a specialist. To a psychologist." He frowned, as if the very idea was foreign to him. "Seriously, Em?" "Yes, seriously." She looked into his eyes, her gaze was firm. "I don't want everything to fall apart. But if we don't try, it will fall apart." Jason was silent, looking at the floor. He hated such conversations, hated when he was forced to delve into his feelings. But he saw how Emily looked at him, and saw that she was on the edge. And damn it, he didn't want to lose her. "Okay," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "We'll try. Who do you want to go to?" "I heard about Dr. Aaron Morgan," she said, relaxing a little. "He is a family therapist. They say he's good." "Okay," Jason nodded, although he was still resisting inside. "Sign us up." Emily nodded, feeling the tension release a little. It was a small step, but a step. Maybe all is not lost yet. Maybe they can still repair the cracks. They went to bed in silence, each on their own side of the bed. But for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a faint spark of hope. Jason stared at the ceiling, his thoughts scrambling. He didn't know what awaited them with this Dr. Morgan, but he knew one thing. He didn't want to lose what they had, or whatever else it could have been. There were cracks, but perhaps they could still be glued together. Los Angeles was bathed in golden late morning light as Jason and Emily Harper pulled up to a low-glass building in Beverly Hills. The facade sparkled, reflecting the palm trees and cloudless sky, and the sign at the entrance read, Dr. Aaron Morgan Family Therapy Center. Jason parked their old Honda Accord between a shiny Mercedes and a Tesla, glancing at his wife. "Are you sure we can afford this place?" he asked, turning off the engine. His voice was level, but there was a familiar tension in it. Emily, who was sitting in the passenger seat, straightened her dark hair in a low bun and looked at him. "I called the office. They accept our insurance." She paused, adding more quietly, "Jason, we agreed to try." He nodded, but his fingers were still gripping the steering wheel, as if he wasn't ready to get out of the car. Emily sighed, opened the door, and stepped onto the sidewalk, her heels clicking softly on the asphalt. Jason followed her, adjusting his jacket. He felt out of place, too much glass, too much gloss. This place screamed about money, and he was just a sales manager with a mortgage and 2 kids. Inside, they were greeted by the cool air of the air conditioner and the smell of sandalwood. The hall was decorated in a minimalist style: white walls, wooden floors, a couple of designer chairs, and a table with psychology magazines. Behind the counter, the receptionist, a young woman with a perfect smile, greeted them. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper," she clarified, looking at the tablet. "Dr. Morgan will see you soon. Have a seat. Would you like some water or coffee?" "Water, please," Emily said, sinking into a chair. Jason refused, crossing his arms and looking around the room. He wanted to leave. All this seemed to him like some kind of game, alien and unnecessary, but he promised. A few minutes later, the office door opened and a man came out. Dr. Aaron Morgan, 45, was exactly as online reviews described him: charismatic, confident, but without a hint of arrogance. Tall, with light gray in his dark hair, he was dressed in a dark gray suit without a tie, his shirt unbuttoned at the top button. His blue eyes radiate warmth, and his smile was such that you couldn't help but want to trust. "Jason, Emily," he said, holding out his hand. His voice was soft, with a slight hoarseness, like that of a man who knows how to calm with just one tone. "Glad to see you. Come in, please." Emily shook his hand, her fingers lingering a split second longer than necessary. She immediately looked away, feeling her cheeks getting slightly warmer. Jason, busy with his thoughts, didn't notice. He shook Morgan's hand firmly, almost defiantly, and walked into the office. Dr. Morgan's office was the epitome of understated luxury. A huge window overlooked the city, letting in soft light that fell on a dark green sofa and 2 leather armchairs. An abstract painting in blue tones hung on the wall, and on the shelf were books on psychology interspersed with small sculptures. Morgan's desk was almost empty: a laptop, a notepad, and a pen. No chaos, no extra stuff. "Sit down wherever you feel comfortable," Morgan said, pointing to the sofa and armchairs. "Today is our first meeting, so let's get acquainted. No pressure, just conversation." Emily chose the sofa. Jason sat next to her, but a little further away than usual. Morgan took the chair opposite him, placing a notebook on his lap. He took his time, giving them time to get comfortable. His gaze slid between them, attentive but unobtrusive. "So," he began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me what brought you here. No need for details if you're not ready. Just, how do you feel?" Emily looked at Jason, waiting for him to start. But he was silent, looking at the floor, his fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of his jacket. She sighed and spoke first. We grew apart," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't know how to explain this. We've been married 12 years, we have 2 children, and I feel like we're no longer a team. I'm angry all the time, he's silent all the time, and I don't want this to continue." Morgan nodded, his face remaining calm, but there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Thank you, Emily. It's fair. Jason, is there anything you want to add?" Jason shrugged, his voice low, almost sullen. "I don't know what to say. She's probably right. We are quarreling, but I don't understand what she wants. I work, I try for my family, and she seems to always be dissatisfied. Emily tensed, her lips pursing. That's not true, Jason. I'm not unhappy with you. I just, I feel alone. Even when you are at home, it is as if you are not there. It's not fair, he said, looking at her for the first time. I'm doing everything I can. Do you think it's easy for me? Do you think it's easy for me? Her voice trembled, and she fell silent, looking down. She felt awkward breaking down in front of Morgan, but her emotions came out. Morgan raised his hand, his gesture soft but confident. Okay, let's take a break. You're both feeling stressed, and that's normal. You are here to figure things out, not to argue. He smiled, and the room seemed to breathe a little easier. Let's try this. Tell us what you value in each other. What keeps you together? Emily looked at Jason, her eyes softening. She thought, fiddling with the ring on her finger. Jason, he's reliable. He's always been like this. When Mia was born, he got up at night, even if he had to go to work in the morning. And he's funny when he wants to be. We used to laugh a lot. Jason blinked as if her words had taken him by surprise. He coughed, looking away. Emily, she's smart. She always knows what to say and how to help. And she's a good mom. The children adore her. Morgan nodded, writing something down on his notepad. This is a good start. You see something important in each other. This is the basis from which to work. He looked at Emily, his gaze warm but professional. Emily, you mentioned loneliness. Can you tell us a little more? She hesitated, feeling his eyes seem to see right through her. Her heart beat a little faster, and she immediately mentally checked herself. What nonsense, Emily. He's just doing his job. But still, she couldn't help but notice how he listened attentively, without judgment, as if her every word carried weight. I don't know how to explain, she began. I have a job, children, a house, but I feel like I'm not there. I run all the time, I do something all the time, but it seems to me that I am dissolving. And I want Jason to see it. So he asks how my day is, so that we talk not only about bills or schedules. Morgan nodded, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than necessary. It was a fleeting moment, but Emily felt a warmth in her chest, which was immediately replaced by a feeling of guilt. She looked at Jason, but he was looking out the window, his face unreadable. Jason, Morgan said, turning to him. How do you hear this? How do you feel when Emily talks about this? Jason shrugged, his voice quiet. I don't know. I don't understand what she wants. I ask how her day is, but she is always busy or angry. I can't guess what she needs. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Morgan intervened gently. Let's try differently. Jason, imagine Emily telling you what she wants right now. What would you do? Jason frowned, clearly unprepared for such a question. I would try. But she must say it clearly. I don't read minds. Emily rolled her eyes, but Morgan smiled, his tone remaining light. That's fair. And you, Emily? If Jason asked what you wanted, what would you say? She thought, her fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of her skirt. I want him to be close, not just physically, so that he would look at me like before, so that we can laugh and talk about something other than business. I want to feel like he needs me. Morgan nodded, his eyes meeting hers again, and this time she didn't look away. There was something, understanding, almost personal, in his gaze. She felt her cheeks warm again and quickly lowered her eyes, pretending to adjust her ring. The session continued for another half hour. Morgan asked questions, gently guiding the conversation, helping them get it out. He didn't press, didn't force me to delve into painful details, but his questions were as precise as a scalpel. By the end of the meeting, Emily felt exhausted, but strangely relieved. Jason, on the other hand, looked wary, as if he still wasn't sure why he was there. Okay, Morgan said, closing the notepad. You took a big step just by coming here. Next week, I would like to meet with you individually to better understand each of you. This is fine? Emily nodded. Jason muttered, Yes, fine. Morgan stood up, holding out his hand. Thank you for trusting me. We have just started, but I believe that you can find common ground." Emily shook his hand, and again her fingers lingered a little longer. His skin was warm, and his grip was firm but soft. She felt her heart skip a beat and immediately mentally scolded herself. "You're married, you idiot. He's just a therapist." Morgan looked at her. His smile was professional, but there was something in his eyes that made her think. Or did she imagine it? She didn't know. Jason shook Morgan's hand, not noticing anything, and headed towards the exit. Emily followed him, feeling strangely confused. She was here for their marriage, for their family. But why then did her thoughts return to Dr. Morgan's blue eyes? In the parking lot, Jason was silent as he unlocked the car. Emily sat up, looking out the window. She felt vulnerable, but at the same time, alive. For the first time in a long time, someone listened to her, really listened. And it was scary. "Well, what do you think?" Jason asked as he started the engine. She shrugged, trying to sound neutral. "He seems professional. I think it's worth continuing." "If you say so," he said, but there was no enthusiasm in his voice. They drove home, and Emily looked at the palm trees flashing outside the window, trying to understand what she was feeling. There were still cracks in their marriage, but now something new had been added to them, a thin, barely noticeable thread connecting her to Dr. Morgan's office, and it scared her more than she was willing to admit. Tuesday morning in Los Angeles was gray, with sparse clouds moving lazily across the sky. Jason and Emily sat in the car again in front of the glass building of Dr. Aaron Morgan's Family Therapy Center. The interior smelled of coffee from the paper cup Emily held in her hands and the tension that seemed to become their constant companion. Jason drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, looking at the building's entrance like it was a portal to another world. "Are you sure you want to continue this?" he asked, finally turning to Emily. His voice was level, but there was a hint of doubt in it. "I mean, this idea of separate sessions sounds kind of weird." Emily took a sip of her coffee, her eyes fixed on the sign with Morgan's name on it. "He said it would help him understand us better. And ourselves too." She looked at her husband. Her brown eyes were serious. "Jason, we're already here. Let's at least try." He sighed, rubbing his temple. Jason Harper didn't like having his life picked apart, especially by strangers. But something about Morgan, his calmness, his ability to listen without judgment, made him feel like maybe this wasn't such a bad thing, or at least not as scary as he expected. "Okay," he muttered, opening the car door. "But if this turns into some kind of nonsense, I'll pass." Emily smiled weakly, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She couldn't help but think about the last session, the way Morgan looked at her, the way his voice sounded when he asked questions. It was stupid, she knew. He was their therapist, a professional. But still, her heart beat a little faster when she imagined his face. Inside Dr. Morgan's office, nothing has changed. The same soft light pouring through the huge window, the same dark green sofa, the same leather chairs. Aaron Morgan greeted them with the same warm smile that seemed to melt away any awkwardness. Today, he was wearing a dark blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, giving him a slightly more relaxed look. His blue eyes swept over them, lingering on Emily a split second longer than necessary. Or did she imagine it? "It's good to see you again," he said, pointing to the sofa. "Take a seat. Today, we will have a short general session, and then I would like to propose starting individual meetings. What do you say?" Jason sat with his arms crossed, his posture betraying wariness. "Are you sure this is necessary? I thought we would talk together." Morgan nodded, sitting down in the chair opposite. His movements were smooth, confident, like a man who knows what he is doing. "Good question, Jason. Sessions together are important, but sometimes talking one-on-one helps me better understand what each of you is going through. This does not mean that we separate you forever. This is just a way to dig a little deeper." Emily looked at Jason, waiting for his reaction. She knew how much he disliked being analyzed, but she herself found the idea of individual sessions intriguing. The ability to speak openly without having to choose words so as not to offend your husband. And to be honest with myself, the opportunity to be in this office with Morgan one-on-one. I agree, she said. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt a little nervous. I think this might help. Jason frowned, but when he caught Morgan's gaze, he softened. Okay, if you both think it will work, I'm in. Morgan smiled, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was pleased with their decision. Great. Then let's start with a short conversation together. Tell us how the week went since our last meeting. What has changed? The general session was tense, but not as intense as the first. Emily spoke more, describing how she tried to be more patient but still felt invisible in their home. Jason, as usual, was more reserved, but admitted that he tried to help more with the children. However, his words sounded like he was doing it out of a sense of duty, and not because he really wanted to. Morgan listened, making occasional notes on a notepad. He asked questions that made them both think. Emily, what does it mean to you to be seen? Or, Jason, when do you feel valued by Emily? His voice was like a warm current, balancing their emotions, and even Jason, despite his resistance, began to relax. At the end of the half hour, Morgan put down his notebook. Okay, you both did a great job. Now I propose to start individual sessions. Jason, you go first. Emily, you can wait in the lobby, or if you'd like, you can come back in an hour. Emily nodded, standing up. I'll wait. She looked at Jason, trying to catch his eye, but he was already looking at Morgan, as if preparing for something inevitable. When she left, the office door closed quietly behind her. It was cool in the hall, and she sank into one of the designer chairs, pulling out her phone. But her thoughts were not about messages or mail. She thought about Morgan the way he looked at her when she spoke. It was ridiculous, she knew. But still, her fingers nervously fiddled with the strap of her bag, and her heart beat a little faster. Jason, first individual session. Jason sat on the couch, feeling like he was being interrogated, even though Morgan wasn't even trying to interrogate him. The therapist leaned back in his chair. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze was attentive. So, Jason, Morgan began, his voice soft but direct. This is your space. There are no right or wrong answers here. What do you want to discuss? Jason shrugged, his fingers fiddling with the cuff of his shirt. Don't know. I'm not used to such conversations. To be honest, I'm not even sure why I'm here. Morgan smiled, and there was not an ounce of condemnation in his smile. This is fine. Many people feel this way in the beginning. Let's start with something simple. Tell us about yourself. Not about marriage, not about family, about you. Who is Jason Harper? Jason blinked, not expecting such a question. He thought, looking out the window, where the tops of palm trees could be seen. I'm an ordinary guy, I guess. I work in sales. I try to make sure my family has everything. I don't know what else to say. What do you like? Morgan asked, tilting his head. What makes you feel alive? Jason frowned. He hadn't thought about it. For how long? Years. I used to love fishing. I went to the lake with my father when I was a kid. Now, I don't know. No time. Morgan nodded, writing something down on his notepad. What if there was time? What would you do? Jason shrugged, but the corner of his mouth twitched into a faint smile. I probably would have taken the fishing rod and gone somewhere quiet. No phones, no clients. Morgan smiled, and Jason suddenly felt like talking to him. Wasn't so bad. This guy didn't try to correct him or tell him what he was doing wrong. He just listened. And damn, it felt good. They talked for another half hour about work, about the pressure Jason felt, about how he sometimes didn't know how to approach Emily. Morgan asked questions that made him think, but didn't force him. By the end of the session, Jason felt lighter, although he wasn't ready to admit it. You made a good move, Jason, Morgan said, standing up. I think we'll find a way to help you. See you next week? Yes, Jason nodded, shaking his hand. For the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe Morgan knew what he was doing. Emily, after the session. As Jason walked out into the hall, Emily stood up, straightening her skirt. He looked, not as tense as usual. This surprised her. How did it go? She asked, trying to sound neutral. Okay, he replied, shrugging his shoulders. Your turn. I'll wait in the car. She nodded, feeling her stomach clench with excitement. After Jason left, she walked into the office and Morgan greeted her with the same warm smile. "Emily, good to see you," he said, pointing to the sofa. "Take a seat. How are you feeling?" She sat up, fiddling with the ring on her finger. "Honestly, I'm nervous. I'm not used to talking about myself like that." Morgan nodded, sitting down opposite him. "This is fine. We will move at your pace. Tell us what's on your mind right now." Emily started talking about the kids, about work, about how stuck she felt in a routine. Morgan listened, sometimes asking questions that made her dig deeper. "When was the last time you felt like yourself?" Or, "What would you like to change right now?" His voice was like an anchor, holding her while she tried to sort out her feelings. By the end of the session, she felt exhausted, but liberated. It was as if someone had finally heard her. She stood up, gathering her bag, and Morgan walked her to the door. "You did well, Emily," he said, his voice soft. "It's not easy, but you're doing important work." She smiled, feeling light for the first time that day. "Thank you. I I appreciate it." He opened the door and their hands accidentally touched as she walked past. His fingers lightly grazed her wrist, and she froze, feeling the warmth spread across her skin. It only lasted a split second, but her heart started beating faster. She looked at him and his eyes met hers calm, but with something that made her think. Accident? Or not? "See you next week," he said, his smile professional, but there was something more to it. Emily nodded, muttered something in response, and walked out, feeling her cheeks heat up. In the car, Jason was scrolling through his phone when she sat down. He looked at her, narrowing his eyes. "Are you okay? You look, I don't know, strange." "I'm fine," she answered too quickly, looking away. "I'm just tired." He nodded, starting the car, and they drove home in silence. Emily looked out the window, her thoughts confused. She was here to save their marriage. But why then did her thoughts return to that fleeting touch? And why couldn't she stop thinking about Dr. Morgan? Dr. Aaron Morgan's office was the same as always. Warm light from the huge window, the soft smell of sandalwood, the green sofa where Emily sat, fiddling with the hem of her cardigan. But there was something different in the air today, the tension she brought with her, mixed with something she couldn't quite name. Her heart was beating a little faster than it should, and she tried not to look at Morgan for too long. He sat opposite in his leather chair with a notepad on his lap. His blue eyes were attentive but unobtrusive. Today he was wearing a dark green shirt, the sleeves slightly rolled up, and this casualness made him even more human. "So, Emily," he began, his voice soft as always, with that husky edge that made her feel heard. "This is your second individual session. Want to start with what's bothering you right now?" Emily took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over her cardigan. She knew what she wanted to say, but the words seemed heavy as stones. She looked out the window, where the tops of the palm trees swayed in the wind, and finally spoke. I, I feel invisible," she said quietly, her voice trembling with pent-up emotion. "I don't know how to explain this. I do everything I have to. Work, take care of the children, keep the house in order. But it's like I'm not there. Nobody sees me. Not the one who cooks dinner or checks homework, but the real me." Morgan nodded, his gaze warm but not interrupting. He leaned forward slightly to show that he was listening, which prompted her to continue. "I know Jason is trying," she said, her voice becoming a little firmer. "He's a good father, a good husband, in a way. But he became so boring, predictable. All we talk about is bills, kids' schedules, what to buy at the store. He doesn't ask how my day is, doesn't notice if I'm tired or if I just want to laugh like before." She fell silent, feeling her throat tighten. "Sometimes it seems to me that I'm just part of the furniture for him." Morgan made a note on his notepad, but his eyes never left her. "It's hard, Emily. Feeling unseen, especially in a marriage where you've been together for so long. Can you remember when it started? When did you first feel invisible?" She became lost in thought, her gaze wandering around the room until it settled on an abstract painting on the wall. Probably after Ethan was born. Mia was already mobile, Ethan was a baby, and everything became so chaotic. I quit my full-time job and only took a couple of college courses so I could be home. And then Jason started working more to cover expenses. We just stopped being us. We became parents, employees, but not a couple. Morgan nodded, his face remaining calm, but there was something flashing in his eyes, sympathy, maybe. You are describing a very common moment in a marriage when life takes over and you lose touch with each other. But let's talk about you. Not about Jason, not about the kids. What do you want, Emily? If you could be seen, what kind of person would you be? This question took her by surprise. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. What did she want? She was a mother, a wife, a teacher for so long that she forgot who she was before, or who she could have been. I, I don't know, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. Sometimes I think about how things were before. When Jason and I first started dating, we could talk for hours and laugh about stupid things. I felt alive, free, and now, I don't know who I am except the one in control. Morgan smiled slightly, but it wasn't a condescending smile, but one that said, I understand. That's fair, Emily, and it's already a big step to admit that you want to find yourself. But let me ask, what prevents you from being that living, free Emily, even in small things? She shrugged, her fingers starting to fiddle with her cardigan again. I don't know. Time? Energy? Jason, she smiled bitterly. Sometimes I look at him and think, you don't even see how I've changed. He doesn't notice that I stopped wearing lipstick or that I no longer read the books I loved. He just lives his own life, and I have to adapt. Morgan set the notepad down on the table, his movements fluid, almost hypnotic. He leaned a little closer, his voice became quieter, but this made it even more soulful. Emily, let me say something. What you're feeling isn't just about Jason. This is about you. You want to be seen, but maybe you just want to be seen. Not the one who keeps everything under control, but the one who laughs, who dreams, who wants something more. And this doesn't mean Jason is a bad husband. This means that you both lost something along the way. Her eyes widened, and she felt her cheeks warm. His words touched something deep inside, as if he saw her not a wife, not a mother, but a woman who was hiding under all these roles. She looked away, afraid that he would notice her emotions spilling out. Do you think this is possible? She asked, her voice trembling. Find it again? To be real? Morgan smiled, his eyes were warm, but he didn't cross the line. I believe so, but it starts with you. In order to allow yourself to want, allow yourself to be. He paused, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than necessary. You deserve it, Emily. She felt her throat tighten and her cheeks burn. His words, his voice, his look, it was all too much. She wanted to say something, but instead she just nodded, lowering her eyes. She suddenly felt hot, as if the air in the office had become thicker. Morgan sat back in his chair, returning to his professional manner. Let's try something. Before we meet again, think about something that brings you joy. Maybe it's reading, walking, dancing, whatever. Do it, even if it only takes 10 minutes. Do you agree? Yes, she said, her voice quieter than she wanted. I will try. The session ended and Emily stood up, packing her bag. Her movements were slightly awkward, as if she was afraid to meet his gaze. Morgan walked her to the door as always, but this time she felt his presence more keenly. His scent light, with notes of cedar, touched her when he opened the door. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, she said, trying to sound neutral. It helped. Aaron, he corrected with a slight smile. And I'm glad, Emily. You are doing important work. She smiled, but her cheeks were still burning. As she turned to leave, her bag got caught on the doorknob and she almost dropped it. Morgan instinctively reached out to help, and his fingers touched her forearm, a light, almost imperceptible touch. But for Emily, it was like an electric shock. She froze, her gaze darting to his face, but he had already removed his hand, his expression remaining calm. Careful, he said with a soft smile, as if nothing had happened. Yes, thank you, she muttered, feeling her face heat up. She quickly left without looking back and almost ran towards the elevator. In the car, Jason was waiting for her, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she sat down and frowned. Are you okay? The face is red. It's just hot, she lied, looking away. The session was intense. He nodded without going into details and started the car. Emily looked out the window, her thoughts confused. She felt guilty, but at the same time alive. For the first time in a long time, she felt that someone was seeing her, not her wife, not her mother, but her. And it scared her more than she was willing to admit. She knew Morgan had done nothing to cross the line. He was a professional. His words were part of the therapy. But that look, that touch, they stuck in her head like a melody that cannot be forgotten. And when she closed her eyes, she still saw his face. Dr. Aaron Morgan's office was as immaculate as always. Soft light streaming through the window, a dark green sofa, the smell of sandalwood that seemed to permeate the air. But for Jason and Emily, this place has become more than just a therapist's office. It was an island where they could exhale, sort out their thoughts, although each did it in his own way. Today's session promised to be different. The doctor suggested that they start keeping diaries to understand their feelings. The idea sounded strange, almost childish, but both agreed to try. Jason sat on the couch in Morgan's office, his knees shaking nervously. He was holding in his hands a small black notebook that he bought at a stationery store on the way home after the last session. It wasn't his style, he wasn't the type to write down his thoughts, but Morgan convinced him it could help. Just write what comes to mind, he said. Don't think about correctness. This is just for you. So, Jason, Morgan began, leaning back in his chair. His dark blue shirt was slightly unbuttoned, and his gaze, as always, was warm but penetrating. Have you started writing? Jason shrugged, his fingers fiddling with the corner of his notebook. Yes, a little. Honestly, it's weird. I don't know what I should write there. It's like I'm a schoolboy in literature class. Morgan smiled, his voice soft, but with a slight hint of challenge. This is not about the right words, Jason. It's about being honest with yourself. What did you write? Want to share? Jason frowned as he opened his notebook. The pages were covered in his uneven handwriting. The sentences were short, almost choppy. He coughed, feeling awkward, but began to read. Tuesday. Work is crap. The client lost his temper again, and the boss yelled. I came home. Emily was on edge. I don't know what she needs. I try, but she is always unhappy. Sometimes it seems like I'm just a wallet for her. He fell silent, his cheeks turning slightly red. Well, something like that. Morgan nodded, his face remaining calm, but there was something flashing in his eyes. Approval. Maybe. That's fair, Jason. And this is important. You feel pressure at work, at home, and it seems that you are not appreciated for what you do. Am I right? Jason shrugged, but his shoulders relaxed a little. Maybe. I don't know how to please her. She says she wants to talk, but when I ask how her day is, she's either busy or angry. I don't understand. Morgan leaned a little closer, his voice quieter, almost conspiratorial. Jason, you are a man who takes responsibility. You support your family, work to keep everything stable. This is power. But sometimes women, they want more than just stability. They want emotions, attention. And that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. They're just different languages. Jason blinked. Morgan's words sounded like something he'd always known, but couldn't quite articulate. You think I should what? Talk more? Not necessarily, Morgan said, his smile almost fatherly. Start small. Notice what she does. Tell her you appreciate her. Show that you are still the man she married. Confident, strong, but open. You can do it, Jason. I see this strength in you. Jason felt something resonate within him. Morgan didn't judge or point out that he was a bad husband. He spoke to him as an equal, and it was nice. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt understood. Okay, he said, closing the notebook. I will try. Morgan nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. Fine. Keep writing. And Jason, don't be afraid to be yourself. You are already doing more than you think. Emily sat in the same office an hour later. Her diary was completely different, small, with a flowery cover, bought at a bookstore. She wrote more than she expected, sometimes late at night, when the children were asleep and Jason was watching TV in the living room. Her notes were longer, full of emotion, sometimes confusing, but honest. Morgan greeted her with the same warm smile, but today there was something else in his gaze, curiosity, perhaps. He sat down opposite her, his hands resting on the armrests of the chair, and Emily suddenly noticed his fingers lightly tapping the skin. It was a small thing, but for some reason she remembered it. "Emily," he began, his voice soft as always. "You started writing. Want to share? Only what you are ready for." She nodded, opening the diary. Her fingers trembled, but she forced herself to speak. I wrote a lot. Sometimes I just poured out everything that was in my head. For example, she found the page and began to read. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Monday. Tired. The college class was good. The students were asking questions, and I felt alive for a second. But then I returned home, and everything was the same. Dinner, homework, laundry. Jason showed up late and didn't even ask how my day was. Sometimes I want to scream so that he will notice me. But he seems to be sleeping. Not physically, but emotionally." She fell silent, her cheeks slightly red. She was afraid to look up, but when she did look at Morgan, his eyes were full of understanding. "This is powerful, Emily," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "You describe the loneliness that many feel but do not speak about. You want to be noticed, but it seems like Jason doesn't see. Why do you think so?" Emily shrugged, her fingers fiddling with the corner of the page. "He was always so practical. It used to be nice he cared that everything was in order. But now, he's like a robot. All he cares about is work, bills, making sure his children are fed. I don't feel like he wants me, not as a woman, but as a person." Morgan nodded, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than necessary. "It hurts, eh? Jason may not realize how his actions or lack thereof affect you. Men sometimes get stuck in their role. He sees himself as the breadwinner, and this overshadows everything else. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It's just, he got lost in it." Emily frowned, her voice becoming harsher. "But why should I justify him? I'm also drowning in routine, but I'm trying. I ask how his day is, I try to talk, and he's just silent." Morgan raised his hand slightly, his gesture soft but stopping. "You're right. You don't have to justify it. But Emily, think about this. Jason may not know how to get out of this role. He is locked into his idea of what a husband should be. And this is his weakness, not yours." Her eyes widened as Morgan's words touched something inside her. She felt her irritation mix with relief that someone had finally said it out loud. Jason was a good man, but his inability to see her pain made her lonely. "Do you think he can change?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Morgan smiled, but there was something cautious in his smile. "I think he can if he wants. But Emily, it's not just about him. This is about you. You deserve to be seen, and if he can't give that, you need to find a way to be real for yourself." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "You already started this with the diary. It's bold." Her cheeks flushed again, and she looked away, feeling her heart beat faster. His words were professional, but there was something personal about them, as if he knew more than she was saying. The sessions ended and Morgan was left alone in his office. He opened the notebook where he kept notes about Jason and Emily and reread their notes, which they had allowed him to take. Jason's diary was short, full of suppressed disappointment, but there was a sense of strength in it, a man who is in control, even if it destroys him. Emily's diary was different, emotional, almost poetic, full of pain and a desire to be seen. Morgan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the table. He knew more than he should, not because they talked too much, but because he knew how to read between the lines. Jason was reliable but private, and his confidence was as fragile as glass. Emily was alive but cornered, and her desire for attention made her vulnerable. He knew how to work with it. With Jason, he enhanced his masculine confidence, emphasizing his strength, his role. This made Jason more open, more trusting. With Emily, he was softer, emphasizing her pain, her right to be seen, and perhaps he went a little further than necessary when talking to her. Not with words, but with a look, a tone. He didn't cross the line, but he felt her react, and that intrigued him. Morgan closed the notebook, his lips curling into a slight smile. He was a professional, but not a saint, and he knew that this coupled the cracks in their marriage, their diaries, was something more than just another case. It was a story that was just beginning. Emily left the office, her cheeks still burning. She felt exposed, but at the same time heard. Morgan saw her, and it scared her. She knew he was just doing his job, but his words, his look, they got stuck in her head. In the car, Jason was waiting for her, scrolling through his phone as usual. He looked at her, narrowing his eyes. "You're red again. What did he say to you?" "Nothing," she answered too quickly, looking away. "We just talked a lot." "And you? What did you write in your diary?" Jason shrugged as he started the car. "All sorts of nonsense. But you know, he's not that bad, this Morgan. He seems to understand what he's talking about." Emily nodded, looking out the window. Her thoughts were somewhere else in the office, where she left a part of herself, and where, perhaps, she began to find something new. Emily woke up with her heart racing, her breathing uneven, and fragments of the dream still flashing through her head. She lay in the darkness of their bedroom, Jason snoring quietly next to her, and outside the window Los Angeles was drowning in the silence of the night. The dream was vivid, too real. She was sitting in Dr. Morgan's office, but instead of the usual sofa, there was a soft bed with white sheets. Aaron, he let her call him Aaron, looked at her with his blue eyes, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You deserve to be seen, Emily," he said, and his hand touched her cheek, slowly, as if he was afraid of scaring her. She didn't pull away, and then she woke up. Emily pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart pounding. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong. But the warmth that remained after sleep did not go away. She turned on her side, looking at Jason, his face softened by sleep. He was her husband, the father of her children, the man with whom she built a life. But why then did her thoughts return to another man? She closed her eyes, trying to push away the image of Aaron, but he was there, in every curve of his smile, in every word he spoke in their last session. Her cheeks burned, and she felt guilty, but at the same time, alive. For the first time in years, she felt like a woman, and not just a mother or wife. The morning was chaotic, as always. Mia and Ethan were arguing over who would get the cereal box first. Jason was drinking coffee while scrolling through his phone, and Emily was trying to pack the kids' lunches. She was on autopilot, but her mind was elsewhere. She barely noticed Jason look at her, narrowing his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse from morning fatigue. "You look. I don't know, I'm distracted." Emily blinked, forcing herself to smile. "I just didn't get enough sleep. Everything is fine." He nodded without going into details and returned to the phone. Emily felt a pang of irritation. He didn't even ask why she didn't get enough sleep, didn't try to dig deeper. But she immediately pulled herself together. It was Jason. He's always been like this, and she couldn't blame him for her thoughts wandering elsewhere. With the kids and Jason gone, Emily was left alone in the quiet house. She poured herself more coffee and opened her diary, the one with the flowery cover that had become her refuge. She wrote almost every day, pouring out everything she couldn't say out loud onto the pages. But today her hand froze over the paper. She wanted to write about the dream, about how Aaron looked at her, but fear stopped her. What if someone finds the diary? What if she herself admitted that these thoughts were real? Instead, she wrote, "I'm tired of being invisible. I want to feel alive, but I don't know how, and I'm afraid that I'm doing something wrong." She closed the diary, her fingers trembling. It was all she could afford. The evening of the same day was ordinary. Dinner, lessons with the children, TV. Jason was sitting on the couch, flipping through the sports channel, while Emily was washing the dishes when her phone suddenly vibrated on the table. She wiped her hands and looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. She frowned, but answered anyway. "Hello?" she said, her voice cautious. "Emily, this is Aaron Morgan," came a familiar voice, soft, with that same hoarseness that made her heart beat faster. "Sorry for calling so late. Just wanted to see how you were doing after our last session. You were particularly open, and I thought it would be worth checking to see if everything was okay." Emily froze, her fingers clutching the phone. She glanced at Jason, who was still watching TV, not paying attention to her. Her throat was dry, and she quietly walked out of the kitchen into the hallway so as not to be heard. "Oh, Doctor, Aaron," she corrected, her voice quieter than necessary. I'm fine. Thank you for calling." "I'm glad to hear that," he said, and she could have sworn she heard a smile in his voice. "You took a big step by sharing your thoughts. It's not easy, but you do it with such integrity. I just wanted to say that this is impressive." Her cheeks flushed, and she pressed her back against the wall, feeling her pulse quicken. "Thank you," she muttered. I'm, I'm just trying to figure it out." "And you do it well," he said, his tone warm, almost intimate. "If you need to talk before our next session, you know where to find me." Sometimes these conversations, they help. Emily swallowed, her thoughts scrambling. It was just a professional call, right? He cared about her as a therapist. But why then did his voice sound as if he was talking only to her, as if there was something more between them? "Yes, of course," she said, trying to sound neutral. "I appreciate it." "Okay," he answered, and for a second there was silence heavy, filled with something that she could not name. "Good night, Emily." "Good night," she whispered, and the call ended. She stood in the hallway, looking at the phone, her heart pounding. Nothing happened. It was just a call. But why then did she feel that she had crossed some invisible line? That night, Emily dreamed about Aaron again. This time they were not in the office, but in some park, where the trees cast long shadows and the air smelled of flowers. He walked next to her, his hand lightly touched her, and he said something that she could not understand, but his voice was like music. She woke up with a feeling of guilt, which was immediately replaced by a strange melancholy. She wanted to go back to that dream, that feeling when someone looked at her as if she was the only one in the world. The next session, Emily sat on the familiar couch, her diary on her lap. She felt vulnerable, as if Morgan could see her dreams, her thoughts. He walked in with the same warm smile as always, but today there was something new in his gaze, a little sparkle that she couldn't ignore. "Emily," he said, sitting down opposite her, "glad to see you. How was your week?" She shrugged, trying not to look him in the eyes. "Fine. Children, work. Everything is as usual." He nodded, but his gaze was attentive, almost piercing. "What's in your diary? Have you written something you want to share?" Emily opened the diary, but her fingers froze. She couldn't read what she wrote about her feelings, about how she was afraid of her thoughts. Instead, she chose a safe passage. "Sometimes I think about how I used to be. I loved to dance, read novels, and walk aimlessly. Now I don't remember when I did something just for myself." Morgan listened with his head slightly tilted, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he smiled. "It's beautiful, Emily. You write as if you still feel that girl inside. She hasn't gone anywhere, you know." Her throat tightened, and she looked away. "Sometimes it feels like it's gone." "No," he said, his voice firm but soft. "She's here, and she wants to be noticed. Not only Jason, but also you." He paused, his gaze lingering on her. "You deserve it." Emily felt her cheeks heat up. His words were the same as in her dream, and it scared her. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck. Instead, she simply nodded, clutching the diary. Jason, his session. Jason, unlike Emily, felt more and more confident during the sessions. Morgan became something of a mentor for him, a person who did not judge, but guided. This week, Jason brought his notebook, where the notes were a little longer, but still sharp, like his thoughts. Wednesday, Emily was cold again. I tried to ask how her day was, but she brushed me off. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. The work is getting worse. The boss is putting pressure on me. Sometimes I just want to go somewhere where no one will want anything from me. He closed the notebook, looking at Morgan. Here, I don't know if this helps. Morgan nodded, his smile encouraging. This helps, Jason. You begin to see what is bothering you. And it's not just about Emily. It's about the pressure you carry. You are a strong person, but even the strong need a break. Jason shrugged, but Morgan's words stung. I just do what I have to do. I always did. And that is your strength, Morgan said, leaning closer. But Jason, you are more than just someone who pulls the plug. You can show Emily that you are not only the breadwinner, but also the man who wants her. Try something unexpected. Surprise her. She will notice it. Jason nodded, feeling a spark ignite within him. Maybe Morgan is right. Maybe he can be what Emily wants him to be. After the session, Emily left the office, her cheeks still burning. She felt like something had changed between her and Morgan, even though nothing had happened. It was the look, the tone, the silence between words. She knew she should stop it, but she couldn't. I didn't want to. In the car, Jason was waiting for her, as usual. He looked at her, narrowing his eyes. You're red again. What's going on there? Nothing, she lied, looking away. We just talked a lot. He nodded, but something flashed in his eyes, suspicion, perhaps. Emily turned away, her mind elsewhere. Nothing happened, but everything has already happened in her heart. Jason Harper has never been one to notice the little things. He is accustomed to the rhythm of his life. Work, home, children, bills. But something had changed in recent weeks, and even he, with his tendency to ignore subtleties, was beginning to feel it. Emily became different. Not sharply, not obviously, but enough to make his internal radar beep in alarm. She was quieter, more often lost in her thoughts, and her smiles, the rare ones that he still caught, seemed not for him. It all started with little things. She began to linger after sessions with Dr. Morgan, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 10. She returned to the car with a slight blush on her cheeks, brushing off his questions with vague, "We were just talking," or "I'm tired." Her phone, which used to be on the kitchen table, was now always with her, and a couple of times Jason noticed her quickly putting it away when he entered the room. He wasn't paranoid, but these small changes added up to a picture he didn't want to see. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Emily was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine, leafing through a psychology magazine. Jason looked at her, trying to remember the last time they talked about something other than schedules or bills. She was beautiful, her dark hair fell over her shoulders, her eyes wandered thoughtfully over the pages, but there was a distance between them that he did not know how to bridge. He began, his voice hoarse from unaccustomed to such conversations. Everything is fine? She looked up, her eyebrows raised slightly. Yes, everything is fine. Why are you asking? He shrugged, feeling awkward. Don't know. You're kind of distant. You're hovering somewhere all the time. Her lips twitched, as if she wanted to smile, but decided against it. I'm just tired, Jason. Work, kids, you know. He nodded, but her answer did not reassure her. He saw the fatigue, but it wasn't just about work or children. It was something else, something she didn't say, and it scared him more than he was willing to admit. At the next individual session, Jason sat in Morgan's office, his knees shaking nervously. A black notebook lay on the sofa nearby, but today he did not want to read his notes. His thoughts were on Emily, and he felt like he was losing control not only over her, but over himself. Morgan walked in with his warm smile as always, his dark gray shirt slightly unbuttoned, and his blue eyes searching Jason intently. He sat down in his chair, placing the notebook on his lap, and leaned a little closer, as if sensing that today would not be easy. Jason, he began, his voice soft but direct. You look tense. What's happening? Jason sighed, rubbing his temple. I don't know how to say this. This is about Emily. She's moving away. I can't explain it, but I feel it. She's somewhere not here all the time. And he hesitated. His voice became quieter. I'm starting to think it has something to do with these sessions. Morgan raised an eyebrow, but his face remained calm. With sessions, can you tell us more? Jason shrugged, his fingers clenching into a fist. She lingers after them. Something. The difference is coming back. He blushes and waves it off when I ask. And she doesn't talk to me anymore. Not like before. I thought this would bring us closer, but it seems like things are only getting worse. Morgan nodded, making a note on his notepad. His movements were measured, but Jason noticed how his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were weighing each word. It's hard, Jason, Morgan said, his voice warm but with a hint of sympathy. When you feel that you are losing touch with the person you love, it causes fear. But let's figure it out. You said that Emily is moving away. How does this manifest itself, specifically? Jason frowned, trying to find the words. She talks less. Previously, she always told me how her day went, what annoys her, what she likes. Now she's just silent. Or he answers something like, everything is fine. And, I don't know, maybe I'm making it up, but she seems happier after your sessions, but not with me. Morgan leaned back in his chair, his gaze attentive but unreadable. It's interesting that you noticed this. Sometimes therapy can cause such changes. People begin to delve into themselves, find something new, and this can seem distant. But Jason, let me offer a different perspective. Perhaps Emily is just looking for herself. And to save your marriage, sometimes you need to let the other person feel free. Jason blinked. Morgan's words sounded logical, but something about them pricked him. Freedom? You mean? Let her go? Not really, Morgan said, his smile soft, almost fatherly. I mean, give her space so she can be herself. You are a strong man, Jason. You support your family, you are reliable. But sometimes women, like Emily, want more than just security. They want to feel seen and that their desires are important. If you give her this space, she may come back to you, closer than before. Jason nodded, but inside he felt confused. He wanted to trust Morgan Hell. He trusted the guy. But the thought of giving Emily freedom scared him. What if she goes too far? What if she's already leaving? Try this, Jason, Morgan continued, his voice confident. Do something that shows her that you see her, not just as a wife or mother, but as a woman. And keep writing in your diary. It helps you be honest with yourself. Jason nodded, clutching his notepad. Okay, I will try. When he left the office, he felt a little lighter, but the anxiety did not go away. Morgan was convincing, but something about his words or the way he said them gave Jason pause. He shook his head, driving away these thoughts. He's just tired. Everything will be fine. Emily sat on the couch in Morgan's office, her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of the diary. She felt on the edge between guilt and desire, between duty and something she couldn't name. The dreams about Aaron did not stop, and each time they became brighter, more real. And that call, it changed everything. Nothing happened, but she knew that she had already crossed some line in her thoughts. Morgan walked in, his smile as warm as ever, but there was something else in his eyes today, a little sparkle that made her heart skip a beat. He sat across from her, his dark green shirt highlighting his eyes, and Emily found herself staring at him for too long. Emily, he said, his voice soft, almost intimate. How are you today? What's in your diary? She opened the diary, but her fingers were trembling. She couldn't read what she wrote about her dreams, about how his voice sounded in her head. Instead, she chose a safe passage. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. I want to feel alive, but I'm afraid it will destroy everything I have. Morgan listened with his head tilted slightly, his gaze attentive, but there was something else in it, an understanding that seemed too personal. When she finished, he smiled. This is powerful, Emily, he said, his voice low. You are honest with yourself, and that is brave. You talk about wanting to be alive. What does this mean to you? She shrugged, her eyes dropping to the diary. I don't know. Sometimes I remember what I was like before. I loved to dance, laugh, and be spontaneous. And now, I'm just a mom, wife, teacher. I don't feel like myself." Morgan nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "You deserve to feel like yourself, Emily. Not only for others, but also for yourself. And you know, I see that spark in you. She hasn't gone anywhere." Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away, feeling her pulse quicken. His words were professional, but there was something else in them, a warmth that she couldn't ignore. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck. The session ended, but Emily was in no hurry to leave. She hesitated, packing her bag, as if she was stalling for time. Morgan stood up to see her out, but instead of opening the door, he took a step closer. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper, "you are doing a great job. But if you need to talk, outside of sessions, you know where to find me." She froze, her eyes met his, and for a second time stood still. There was something in his gaze that she could not decipher, not professional, but personal. Her throat was dry, and she nodded, not trusting her voice. He smiled, but didn't back down. Instead, he closed the office door, the sound of the lock clicking louder than it should have been. Emily felt her heart skip a beat, but she didn't move. Nothing happened. But at that moment, everything changed. Dr. Aaron Morgan's office was the same as always. Warm light pouring through the huge window, the smell of sandalwood, a soft green sofa. But today the air was heavy, saturated with something that Emily could not name, but felt in every cell. The door had just closed behind her, and the click of the lock was still ringing in her ears. She stood in the middle of the room, her bag hanging on her shoulder, and her heart was pounding as if it wanted to burst out of her chest. Aaron looked at her, his blue eyes calm, but there was a spark in them that she couldn't ignore. "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, "you are in no hurry to leave. Do you want to talk more?" She swallowed, her fingers tightening nervously on the strap of her bag. She needed to leave. She knew it. But her legs did not move, and his gaze attracted her like a magnet. I I don't know," she muttered, her voice shaking. "It's just, everything is so confusing." Aaron nodded, his smile was soft, but there was something new in it, not professional, but personal. He took a step towards a small cabinet in the corner of the office, where books and some small items were kept. Opening the door, he took out a bottle of red wine and two glasses. Emily froze, her eyes widening. "This is not exactly according to protocol," he said with a slight grin, putting the glasses on the table. "But sometimes, to speak honestly, you need to relax a little. Will you have a drink with me?" Her mind screamed that this was wrong. She was married. He was her therapist. But her body, her feelings, they pulled her in the other direction. She nodded, almost unconsciously, and Aaron poured the wine, his movements smooth, confident. He handed her the glass, and their fingers touched lightly. It was a fleeting touch, but it burned her like an electric shock. "For honesty," he said, raising his glass. "For honesty," she echoed, her voice barely audible. She took a sip, feeling the warm wine slide down her throat, but it didn't calm her down. On the contrary, her nerves were stretched like strings. Aaron sat on the edge of the couch, closer than usual, but still keeping his distance. His eyes never left hers, and Emily felt her cheeks heat up under his gaze. She put the glass on the table, afraid that her trembling hands would give her away. "Emily," he began, his voice soft, but there was a strength in it that made her listen. "You said that you feel invisible, but I see you. I see a woman who is strong, who wants to live, who deserves more than what she has." Her throat tightened, and she looked away, trying to control her emotions. "You shouldn't say that," she whispered. This is wrong." "Wrong." He leaned a little closer, his voice became quieter, almost intimate. "Emily, you spend so much effort trying to be right for everyone, for Jason, for the children, for the world. But what about you? What about what you want?" She looked at him, her eyes shining with the tears she was holding back. "I don't know what I want," she admitted, her voice trembling. I I just want to feel alive." Aaron smiled, but it wasn't his usual professional smile. It was something else warm, dangerous. He put his glass on the table and slowly, almost carefully, moved closer to her. Emily froze, her breathing becoming uneven. She knew she had to stop it, say no, leave. But she couldn't. I didn't want to. You are alive, Emily, he said, his voice like a whisper that penetrated her soul. You were always alive. I just forgot about it. He extended his hand, and his fingers touched her cheek, with a light, almost weightless movement. Emily flinched, her eyes widened, but she didn't move away. His touch was warm, soothing, but at the same time it ignited the fire inside her. She felt her mind screaming that this was a mistake, but her body, her heart, they had already given up. Aaron leaned closer, his face so close that she could feel his breath. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his eyes filled with something she couldn't decipher: desire, guilt, determination. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she closed her eyes, and the next second his lips touched hers. The kiss was slow, careful, as if it was giving her a chance to retreat. But Emily didn't back down. She answered, her hands instinctively went to his shoulders, and the kiss became deeper, more greedy. It was like an explosion. Everything that she had suppressed, everything that she was afraid to admit, burst out. She was in shock, her mind screaming that this was wrong, that she was betraying Jason, their family. But her body, her feelings, they were stronger. She was drowning in this moment, in its warmth, in the way it made her feel wanted, alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. They pulled away, their breathing heavy, their eyes meeting. Emily felt her cheeks burning and her heart pounding, as if it wanted to burst out. She wanted to say something, but the words did not come. Aaron touched her face, his thumb running over her lower lip, and he smiled, softly, but with a hint of triumph. It's not cheating, Emily, he said, his voice low and convincing. This is healing. You are living again. Her throat tightened, and she looked away, feeling guilt and desire for war within her. His words sounded like they could be true, but she knew they were lies. Or not. She couldn't think clearly. All she knew was that she felt different, alive, and it scared her more than she could express. I need to go, she muttered, standing up. Her movements were awkward, she almost dropped her bag. Aaron nodded, but made no attempt to stop her. He stood up, opening the door, his gaze warm, but there was something else in it, a knowledge that made her vulnerable. See you at the next session, he said, his voice calm, as if nothing had happened. But they both knew that everything had changed. Emily nodded without looking at him and almost ran out of the office. Her cheeks were burning and her thoughts were tangled like wires. She couldn't believe this happened, but at the same time, she couldn't deny how much she wanted it. When Emily got into the car, Jason was waiting for her, scrolling through his phone as usual. He looked at her, his brows furrowed. You were late, he said. His voice was even, but there was a slight wariness in it. Everything is fine? Yes, she answered too quickly, looking away. We just talked a lot. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her a little longer. Emily felt her heart pounding and was afraid that he would notice her burning cheeks, her trembling hands. But Jason just started the car, and they drove home in silence. Emily looked out the window, her thoughts a chaos. She felt different, not guilty, as she expected, but alive. Her eyes were burning, and she knew that it was not only from the wine. It was from the kiss, from Aaron's words, from the way he made her feel wanted. She knew she had crossed the line, but she couldn't stop the warmth that spread inside her. At home, everything was as usual. The children were doing their homework, Jason turned on the TV, and Emily was preparing dinner. But she moved more quietly, her movements were almost mechanical. She caught herself smiling when no one was looking, and immediately pulled herself back. This was wrong. She loved Jason, she loved their family. But then why couldn't she stop thinking about Aaron? Jason noticed that Emily was quieter than usual. She didn't argue or get irritated like before, but her silence was different. It was distant. He looked at her as she cut vegetables for the salad and felt something tighten in his chest. She was beautiful, her dark hair, her thoughtful eyes, but she was somewhere not here, and it scared him. he said when the kids had gone to bed and they were alone in the living room. "Can we talk?" She looked at him, her eyes bright, almost feverish. "Certainly. About what?" He shrugged, feeling awkward. "Don't know. It's just, you're somehow different. I don't understand what's going on." Her lips twitched, but she smiled quickly, too quickly. "It's okay, Jason. Just therapy. She makes you think about a lot of things." He nodded, but her answer did not reassure her. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe Morgan, who spoke of freedom and space. But something in her eyes, in her voice, told him that he was losing her, and he didn't know how to stop it. Emily went to bed that night, but couldn't sleep. She lay next to Jason, listening to his even breathing, and felt her heart break. She crossed the line, and there was no turning back. But at the same time, she couldn't deny how much she wanted it, not just the kiss, but the feeling it gave her. She was alive, and this was both her salvation and her downfall. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jason decided to give it a try. He remembered Morgan's words about how he needed to surprise Emily to show that he saw her as a woman. The idea for a romantic dinner came spontaneously, nothing grand, just candles, wine, music. He even went online to find a recipe for some simple dish that would look impressive. It wasn't his style, but he wanted to try. He entered the living room, where Emily was sitting with a book, her legs tucked under her. She looked relaxed, but her gaze was somewhere far away. He began, trying to sound casual. "I was wondering, maybe we could have dinner this weekend, just the two of us. Let's order children to your sister, light candles, and open the wine, just like before." Emily looked up, her eyebrows raised slightly. For a second, something flashed in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or guilt. But then she smiled, too quickly, too tightly. "Oh, that's nice, Jason. But I have a lot of work on the weekend. Student essays, you know. Maybe another time." His face froze. He expected her to be happy, or at least think. But her refusal was so easy, almost casual, that it stung him more than he expected. "Okay," he said, trying to hide his disappointment. "As you say." She nodded, turning back to her book, but Jason noticed her fingers twitch slightly as she turned the page. He turned and walked into the kitchen, feeling something tighten in his chest. This was not just a refusal, it was something more. The next day, while Emily was at work, Jason decided to unpack the laundry, a small thing he sometimes did to help out. He was opening the washing machine when he noticed something unusual among the usual t-shirts and children's socks. Black lace lingerie, thin, with elegant embroidery, lay on top. He froze, holding it in his hands. It wasn't what Emily usually wore. Her wardrobe was practical. Cotton bras, comfortable panties, nothing superfluous. It was for someone, or for something. He put the laundry back, feeling the blood rush to his temples. His mind tried to find an explanation. Maybe she bought it for herself to feel better. Maybe it was a gift from a friend. But not a single explanation sounded convincing. He closed the car and walked away, trying to drive away the thoughts that were starting to swirl in his head. Later, when Emily returned home, he noticed another detail. She walked in, taking off her coat, and she smelled a new scent, not her usual floral perfume, but something deeper, with notes of sandalwood and vanilla. He couldn't help but notice how that smell mixed with her movements, making her different, more confident, more alien. "New perfume?" he asked, trying to sound casual as they ate dinner. Emily blinked, her fork hovering over her plate. "Oh, yes. I decided to try something new." She smiled, but her eyes avoided his gaze. "I just wanted a change." He nodded, but his stomach clenched. Change. This word sounded like a sentence. At the next individual session, Jason sat in Morgan's office, his black notebook left at home he had not written for several days, too absorbed in his thoughts. Morgan walked in with his warm smile as always, but Jason noticed that his eyes were especially alert today, as if he could sense the tension in the room. "Jason," Morgan began, sitting down in his chair. His dark blue shirt was slightly unbuttoned, and his voice, as always, was soft but insightful. You look worried. What's happening? Jason sighed, his fingers clenching into fists. He didn't mean to sound paranoid, but the words came out naturally. This is Emily. She, she's not with me. Not physically, but... He hesitated, rubbing his temple. Sometimes it seems to me that she is no longer with me mentally. She's somewhere else, and I don't know where. Morgan nodded, his face remaining calm, but he made a note on his notepad. This is a serious feeling, Jason. Can you tell me what makes you think this way? Jason shrugged, his voice becoming quieter. She refused the dinner I wanted to arrange. She said she was busy, but it wasn't about work. I know her. And also, I noticed a new perfume, new linen. She's not the same as before. She seems to be for someone else. Morgan narrowed his eyes slightly, but his tone remained level. It's hard when you feel like you're losing touch. But Jason, let me ask, what if these changes are not about someone else, but about herself? Maybe she's trying to find herself, to feel alive. You said she felt invisible. Perhaps this is her way of coping. Jason frowned. Morgan's words sounded logical, but they weren't reassuring. Maybe, but I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. And he hesitated, his voice becoming almost a whisper. Sometimes I think it has something to do with you. With these sessions, Morgan raised an eyebrow, but his face remained expressionless. With me? Why do you think so? Jason shrugged, feeling stupid, but not backing down. She returns from here changed. Happy, but not with me, and I don't know what you're telling her, but she's changing, and I'm not sure I like it. Morgan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on his notepad. That's fair, Jason, and I appreciate you saying it out loud. But let me offer a different perspective. Maybe it's not where Emily is. Maybe you're not where you should be. He paused, his eyes meeting Jason's. You are a strong person. You support your family. But perhaps you've been so focused on your role that you've forgotten how to be real with it. Not a husband, not a father, but a man who wants her. Jason blinked, Morgan's words hitting him. He wanted to object, but couldn't find the words. Morgan was right, he'd been reliable for so long that he'd forgotten how to be anything else. But this did not explain the new perfume, lingerie, or her aloofness. Try this, Jason, Morgan continued, his voice confident. Do something that will bring you back to her. Not dinner, not plan, something spontaneous. Show her that you are still the man she married, and keep writing in your diary. This will help you understand yourself. Jason nodded, but his suspicions remained. He trusted Morgan, but something about his words or the way he said them made him feel unsure. He left the office with a heavy heart, not knowing what to believe. Emily sat in Morgan's office for her session, her diary on her lap, but she didn't open it. She felt on the edge between guilt for what happened and a desire that would not let go. Kissing Aaron changed everything. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the way his lips touched hers, the way he made her feel alive. But every time she looked at Jason, her heart broke. Morgan walked in, his smile warm, but there was something else in his eyes, a knowingness that made her vulnerable. He sat across from her, his dark green shirt highlighting his eyes, and Emily found herself staring at him for too long. Emily, he said, his voice soft, almost intimate. How are you today? What's happening? She shrugged, her fingers fiddling with the edge of the diary. I don't know. Everything is confusing. I feel guilty, but at the same time, I can't stop it. He nodded, his gaze attentive, but there was something else in it, a warmth that she could not ignore. It's okay, Emily. You are experiencing something new, something that makes you feel alive. And it's scary because it changes everything. She looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. But this is wrong. I'm married. I have children. I shouldn't. Shouldn't what? He interrupted, his voice firm but soft. Feel? Want? Emily, you are not a machine. You are a woman, and you deserve to be seen, wanted. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. I see you, and I know you feel the same. Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away, feeling her pulse quicken. He was right. and it scared her. She wanted him, and it was stronger than her. The session ended, but like last time, she was in no hurry to leave. She hesitated, packing her bag, her movements awkward. Aaron stood up to see her out, but instead of opening the door, he closed it. The click of the lock was quiet, but it echoed in her chest like thunder. She looked at him, her breathing becoming uneven. He stepped closer, his hand touched her shoulder, and she felt her body give in. "Emily," he whispered, his voice like music, "you shouldn't be afraid of yourself." She wanted to say no, wanted to leave, but instead she stepped towards him and their lips met again. It wasn't the same careful kiss as last time. It was desperate, greedy, as if they both knew this was their last chance. Emily felt like her world was falling apart, but at that moment she didn't care. She was alive. When they pulled away, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were sparkling. Aaron smiled, his hand still on her shoulder. "This is not treason," he said, his voice convincing. "This is healing. You are living again." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and left the office, feeling her heart break. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't stop the warmth that spread inside her. And when she got into the car, her eyes were burning not from tears, but from something else. Something she couldn't name, but that made her different. The silence in the Harper house was deceptive. She did not calm, but pressed, like air before a thunderstorm. Jason sat in the living room, the TV blaring softly about sports news, but his eyes were glued to Emily. She sat at the other end of the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face calm, but there was something in her eyes, a feverish gleam that he couldn't decipher. The last weeks had been full of suspicion, and every new hint, her new perfume, lace lingerie, her aloofness only increased his anxiety. He didn't want to believe the worst, but his instincts screamed that something was wrong. The evening was normal. The children were sleeping, Emily was making tea, and Jason was trying to find words to start a conversation. But the words did not come. Instead, he noticed how her phone, lying on the coffee table, lit up with a new message. The screen flashed, and he saw the initials. The message read, "I miss you." Jason froze, his heart skipping a beat. He looked at Emily, who was still in the kitchen, and without giving himself time to think, he grabbed the phone. His fingers trembled as he opened the message. It was short, but every word cut like a knife. "I miss you. See you tomorrow." No details, no hints, but it was enough for his world to start crumbling. Emily returned to the living room with a mug of tea, and her gaze fell on the phone in his hands. Her face turned pale, but she quickly pulled herself together, putting on a smile. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was light, but there was tension in it. Jason picked up the phone, his eyes dark with pain and anger. "Who is M?" he asked, his voice low, almost menacing. "And why does he miss you?" Emily blinked, her smile growing even wider, but it was fake, like a plastic mask. "Oh, it's just Amy Moore, my friend from college. We recently corresponded and reminisced about old things." She held out her hand for the phone, but Jason didn't give it to her. "Amy Moore?" he asked, his eyebrows furrowed. "And she signs herself as M?" "Yes," Emily said, her voice becoming a little harsher. "She always signed like that." "Jason, what are you doing?" "It's just a friend." He looked at her, trying to find the truth in her eyes, but all he saw was evasiveness. He wanted to believe her, wanted to drive away suspicions, but something in her tone, in her two quick lies, told him that she was hiding more than she was saying. He gave her the phone, but his heart sank in pain. "Okay," he said, looking away. "It's just weird." Emily nodded, putting her phone in her pocket. "Don't make things up, Jason. Everything is fine." She went into the kitchen, and he remained sitting, feeling like his world was falling apart at the seams. That night, while Emily was sleeping, Jason couldn't sleep a wink. He lay looking at the ceiling, his thoughts swirling around the message. "I miss you." These words burned him like acid. He wasn't a techie, but he knew he had to do something. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he took out his phone and downloaded a location tracking app. It was simple. He connected it to Emily's phone while she slept, making sure she didn't notice anything. He hated himself for it, but he needed to know. If she was lying, he should have seen the truth. The next day, Emily left for another session with Dr. Morgan. Jason watched her get into the car, her new perfume sandalwood and vanilla still lingering in the air. He opened the app and saw her location being recorded in downtown Beverly Hills at Morgan's office. It was expected, but something told him that he should be there. He didn't plan this, but his legs carried him to the car. Emily sat on the green sofa. Her diary was left at home. She could not write after what happened. Kissing Aaron changed everything. She was confused, but at the same time she couldn't stop herself. His words, "This is not betrayal, this is healing," sounded in her head like a mantra justifying her actions. She knew it was wrong, but every time she saw him, her resolve melted. Aaron walked in, his smile warm, but there was something else in his eyes, a hunger he no longer hid. He closed the door, and the click of the lock was like a signal. Emily felt her pulse speed up. "Emily," he said, sitting closer than necessary. His voice was low, almost hypnotic. "You look tense. What's happening?" She shrugged, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her skirt. I don't know, Jason. He suspects something. I lied to him yesterday, and I feel terrible." Aaron nodded, his hand resting on hers, warm and confident. "You did it to protect him, Emily. You know he can't handle the truth. It will destroy him. You don't owe him pain." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not move away. His words were like poison, sweet and deadly. "But this is wrong, Aaron. I shouldn't be here. Shouldn't do this." He leaned closer, his face so close that she could feel his breath. "You're here because you're alive, Emily. Because you want it, and I want it." His hand slid to her cheek, and she closed her eyes in surrender. Their kiss was not the same as before. He was desperate, full of desire that they both could no longer contain. Emily felt her world falling apart, but she couldn't stop. His hands slid down her back, pulling her closer, and she responded, her fingers tangling in his hair. They moved to the sofa, and everything that was between them, guilt, fear, debt, dissolved in this moment. It was not just passion, it was an escape from everything that was suffocating her. Jason parked his car across the street from Morgan's office. His hands shook as he looked at the app, which confirmed that Emily was still inside. He didn't know why he came, but something pulled him. He got out of the car and walked towards the building. His steps were heavy, as if he was walking to the scaffold. The hall was quiet, the administrator was absent. Jason rode the elevator up, his heart pounding. He stopped in front of Morgan's office door, and that's when he heard them. Muffled voices, ragged breathing, sounds that left no doubt. His hand clenched into a fist, and he felt the blood rush to his head. He pushed the door, and it swung open. Emily and Aaron froze, their faces filled with shock. Emily was sitting on the sofa, her blouse was unbuttoned, her hair was disheveled. Aaron stood nearby, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes cold despite the situation. "Jason," Emily breathed, her voice shaking. She jumped up, trying to button her blouse, her face turning pale. It's not what you think." "Isn't that right?" Jason snapped, his voice filled with pain and anger. "Are you serious, Emily? I heard everything. I saw everything." He turned to Aaron, his fists clenching. "And you bastard, you were our therapist. You should have helped us, not." Aaron raised his hands, his voice calm, almost indifferent. "Jason, I understand that you are angry, but I tried to help. You both chose pain over healing." "Healing?" Jason stepped towards him, his eyes burning. "You slept with my wife and called that healing." Emily began to cry, her hands shaking. "Jason, please. I didn't mean to. You didn't want to." He turned to her, his voice breaking. "You lied to me, about messages, about everything. How long, Emily? How long have you been doing this behind my back?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't know. It just happened." Aaron began to collect papers from the table, his movements measured, as if he was not at the center of the scandal. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said, his voice cold. "But you both had to be honest with yourselves." Emily was looking for herself, and you, Jason, could not give it to her. Jason took a step towards him, his fist raised, but Emily grabbed his arm. Jason, no, please don't. He looked at her, his eyes full of pain. Are you protecting him? After all this, she shook her head, her voice hoarse. I'm not defending. I don't know what to do. Jason pulled his hand away and stepped back, his face contorted with anger and humiliation. I can't stay here. He turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the windows shook. Emily remained standing, her tears dripping onto the floor. She looked at Aaron, but he had already turned away, putting the papers in his briefcase. You said it wouldn't destroy him, she whispered, her voice shaking. You promised. Aaron looked at her, his eyes cold. I said the truth can destroy. And you chose to hide it. He shrugged as if it was none of his business. Go home, Emily. Figure it out. She stood there, her world was collapsing, and he simply walked out, leaving her alone in the office where it all began. Her eyes were burning with tears, but there was no light in them that was there before. Now there was only pain. Emily walked into the house, her steps heavy, as if she was carrying the whole world on her shoulders. There was an oppressive silence in the house, neither children's voices nor the usual muttering of the TV. The lights in the living room were off, and only a faint beam from the kitchen illuminated the hallway. Her heart was still pounding from the scene in Morgan's office, and the tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving stinging marks. She wanted to find Jason, explain, beg, do something to stop this nightmare. But when she entered the kitchen, her gaze fell on the table. There was a piece of paper, neatly folded in half, with her name written in black pen. Emily froze, her hand shaking as she took the letter. She knew what it meant even before she unwrapped it. Jason's handwriting was harsh, the letters almost pressed into the paper, as if he was writing in anger. Emily, I can't live with you anymore. I saw everything, heard everything. You destroyed our family, and I can't pretend that it can be fixed. I'm filing for divorce. I will take the children to my place for the weekend. Don't try to look for me. I don't want to see you. Jason. Her legs gave way, and she sank into a chair, clutching the letter until the paper crumpled. The tears flowed again, but now they were not from shock, but from realization. She lost it, lost their family, and all because of what? Because of a few moments she called healing. She covered her face with her hands, her sobs echoing in the empty house. Mia and Ethan were at her sister's. Jason must have taken them there to avoid seeing her. She was alone, and this loneliness was unbearable. Emily sat there for a long time until her tears dried up, leaving only emptiness. She looked at the letter crumpled in her hands and felt something new ignite inside, not anger, not regret, but cold determination. She knew she was to blame, but Aaron. Aaron wasn't just a participant. He manipulated her, his words, his looks, his healing. It was all part of the game she was caught in. And now she wanted him to pay. Jason spent the night at a motel on the outskirts of Los Angeles, in a room that smelled of damp and cheap detergent. He was awake, his eyes were red from fatigue and anger. The scene in Morgan's office played in his head like a broken record. Emily, her disheveled hair, her blouse, Aaron's smell, his cold, you chose pain. Jason clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. He hated Emily for betraying her, but he hated Morgan even more. This man was their therapist, a man they trusted, and he used that trust to ruin their lives. By morning, Jason had made his decision. He wasn't going to just leave. He wanted Morgan to answer everything. He opened the laptop he had taken with him and began searching. His first step was to find information about Morgan, reviews, profiles, whatever. On his practice's website, everything looked perfect. Rave reviews, professional photos, articles about family therapy. But Jason knew the truth lay deeper. He joined several online forums related to psychotherapy and family counseling. Under an anonymous handle, he wrote a post. Anyone worked with Dr. Aaron Morgan in Los Angeles? I'm looking for feedback, especially from those who have been in family therapy. Something seems suspicious. He didn't expect a quick response, but by evening there were several messages in his inbox. The first was from a woman calling herself Broken Trust 42. She wrote, I was a client of Morgan 2 years ago. He was charismatic, too. He started calling me outside of sessions, telling me that I was special. It's over physically. I left, but I felt used. He knows how to manipulate. Jason felt the blood rush to his temples. It wasn't just his story, it was a template. Another message was from a man whose wife was in therapy with Morgan. She began to withdraw as if she was under his spell. I couldn't prove anything, but she admitted that he got too close. We got divorced. Be careful, this guy is dangerous. Jason read these messages and his anger grew. Morgan didn't just destroy his marriage, he did it systematically, using his power to manipulate vulnerable women. Jason began collecting information, names, dates, details. He contacted Broken Trust 42 and several other people who responded. Some were willing to talk, others were afraid, but they all confirmed one thing. Aaron Morgan was a predator hiding under the guise of a professional. Emily spent the day in a daze. She took time off from work, saying that she was sick, and sat at home, looking into emptiness. Jason's letter lay on the table as a reminder of her mistake. She tried to call him, but he didn't answer. Her sister, who picked up the children, said Jason visited her yesterday, but did not go into detail. Emily felt like an outcast in her own life. By evening, she decided she had to do something. She opened her laptop and started searching for information about Morgan. Her fingers trembled as she entered his name into the search engine. She found his website, his articles, but nothing suspicious. Then she went to forums where they were discussing therapists, and her heart sank when she saw a post from an anonymous user, obviously Jason. She recognized his style, his pain in his words. As she read the answers, she felt her stomach clench. Other women, other stories. She was not the first, she was not special. Aaron used her like he used others, and his words about healing were a lie. She closed her laptop, her hands shaking. She wanted to scream, but instead she just sat there, feeling her world crumble even more. After a few days, Jason had gathered enough information to take action. He contacted a lawyer who specializes in professional misconduct and gave him everything he found. Messages from forums, the names of other clients, his own story. The lawyer was cautious, but agreed that the case was promising. If we find one or two more victims willing to testify, we can file a complaint with the medical board, and if you have an app, you can track a phone's location to find out where a person is. Jason used such an app to track Emily, which led to his decision to go to Morgan's office and find her there with a therapist. News of the investigation began to spread. One of Morgan's former clients, inspired by Jason's posts, filed a formal complaint with the California Board of Psychology. Her story was similar to Emily's. Aaron would call her outside of sessions, tell her she was special, and eventually move on to physical intimacy. Another woman chimed in, providing correspondence with Morgan in which he hinted at personal meetings. The board began an investigation and Morgan's license was in jeopardy. Local media picked up the story, and soon the headline screamed, "Prominent Los Angeles therapist accused of unethical relationships with clients." Morgan's reputation was crumbling and his practice began to lose clients. He hired a lawyer, denying all charges, but the pressure grew. Jason followed the news with a sense of grim satisfaction, but it couldn't numb the pain of his broken marriage. Emily learned about the investigation from the news. She sat in front of the TV, her eyes blank, as a reporter talked about a series of complaints and a potential loss of license. She knew she should feel relieved that Aaron was getting what he deserved, but all she felt was emptiness. She lost everything, her husband, her family, herself. And now that the truth had come out, she didn't know how to live on. Jason, sitting in the motel, watched the same news. He thought about the children, about how to explain to them why Dad and Mom are no longer together. He thought about Emily, how she lied to him, and how he still loved her despite everything. But love was mixed with pain, and he didn't know if he could ever forgive her. The scandal surrounding Morgan was gaining momentum, but for Jason and Emily, it was only part of their personal tragedy. Their marriage was broken, their trust was broken, and no amount of justice could fix it. They were two people lost in the wreckage of their lives, and every step forward seemed impossible. Los Angeles shone under the soft light of the November sun, but there was already a chill in the air, reminiscent of the changing seasons. The city continued to live its own life. Cars hummed, palm trees swayed in the wind, and coffee shops were full of people immersed in their conversations. But for Emily and Jason Harper, time seemed to stand still the day their world fell apart. 6 months have passed since their marriage collapsed under the weight of betrayal and pain, and each of them tried to find a new path alone. Dr. Aaron Morgan disappeared from their lives as suddenly as he entered. The California Board of Psychology stripped him of his license after a high-profile investigation that lasted months. Complaints from former clients, supported by correspondence, testimonies, and even anonymous posts on forums, turned out to be irrefutable. The media fanned the scandal, and his name became synonymous with professional ethics. His luxurious Beverly Hills office is empty. The sign has been removed, the windows are darkened, and inside there is only dust and echoes of the past. There were rumors that Morgan had left town, perhaps even the country, but no one knew for sure. For those whose lives he destroyed, it no longer mattered. He was a ghost who left only destruction in his wake. Emily lived in their old house with Mia and Ethan. The divorce was completed quickly. Jason did not delay, signing all the papers with cold determination. He left her the house so that the children could grow up in a familiar environment, but he took them to his place every weekend. Emily tried to be a support for them, but inside she was broken. Every morning she forced herself to get up, cook breakfast, smile, but her eyes betrayed emptiness. She quit teaching at college, too many memories of trying to be invisible, and started writing a book. This was her way of coping with the pain of throwing out everything that had accumulated. The book, as yet untitled, was about emotional addiction, how charismatic manipulators like Morgan exploit people's vulnerabilities. She wrote at night when the children were asleep, and each line was like a knife opening her own wounds. But this was her healing, slow, painful, but real. Jason moved into a small apartment 10 miles from their old house. It was modest, with minimal furniture and a view of the parking lot, but he didn't care. He wanted to start with a clean slate as much as possible. Sales work continued to occupy his days, but he now found solace in a new company, a Labrador named Max he adopted from a shelter. Max was big, clumsy, and loyal, and his presence made Jason's loneliness a little less acute. Every morning he walked his dog in the park, and these walks became his ritual, the moment when he could breathe freely without thinking about the past. Emily walked down the street in the city center, her bag swinging on her shoulder, and she clutched an envelope in her hands. It was a letter delivered last week, with an unfamiliar return address and an out-of-state stamp. She recognized the handwriting, immediately neat, confident, the same one that had once signed her diary entries. Aaron Morgan. She didn't open it. I couldn't. But I didn't dare throw it away. The letter burned like a coal, reminding her of what she had done and who she had become. She carried it with her as if it might provide answers she didn't have. The street was busy. People were hurrying about their business. Children were running around the fountain. A street musician was playing the guitar. Emily stopped at an intersection, waiting for the green light, when she heard a familiar voice. Low, calm, with a slight hoarseness. She turned her head and saw Jason. He stood a few meters away, holding Max's leash, who happily wagged his tail, sniffing the grass. Jason was talking to an older woman who was petting a dog, and his face. It was different. Not tense, not angry, like in the last months of their marriage. He smiled calmly, without pain, like a man who had found peace. Emily froze, her breathing becoming uneven. She hadn't seen him this close since he took his things out of the house. His hair was a little longer and had some gray in it, but he looked lighter. It was as if the weight he was carrying had become smaller. Max noticed her first. His ears went up, and he pulled the leash in her direction. Jason turned, and their eyes met. For a second, time stopped. Emily felt her throat tighten, and her fingers tightened on the envelope. She wanted to say something, apologize, explain, just say hello, but the words stuck. Jason looked at her, his smile slowly fading, but there was no anger in his eyes. Only fatigue and something else acceptance. "Emily," he said, his voice even, almost neutral. "How are you?" She swallowed, trying to smile, but her lips were trembling. "Fine. And you?" He nodded, patting Max on the head. "That's okay, too. This is Max. I took it a couple of months ago." Emily looked at the dog, her eyes sparkling. "He's cute, suitable for you." Jason smiled slightly, but didn't respond. There was silence, heavy, but not hostile. Emily felt her heart break. She wanted to say so much about how sorry she was, how she hated herself, how she was trying to be a better person. But she knew he didn't want to hear it. Not now. "The kids miss you," she said finally, her voice quiet. "They ask when you will arrive." "I'll pick them up tomorrow," he replied, his tone businesslike but gentle. "Tell them I love them." She nodded, her eyes lowering to the envelope in her hands. Jason noticed him but didn't ask anything. He just looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time, not as a wife, not as a traitor, but as a person who had also lost everything. "Take care of yourself, Em," he said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that cut her like a knife. "You too," she whispered, but he had already turned, taking Max with him. The dog jumped happily, and Jason walked calmly, his back straight, as if he had finally freed himself. Emily stood watching him until he disappeared around the corner. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She looked at the envelope, her fingers gripping it tighter. She didn't know what was in it: apologies, justifications, another lie. And at that moment, she realized that she did not want to know. Aaron Morgan was her past, her mistake, and she wasn't going to let him define her future. She turned and walked the other way, her steps slow but firm. The envelope was still in her hands, but she knew she would throw it away as soon as she reached the trash can. It wasn't about forgiveness or revenge. It was about a woman who was learning to live again, step by step, even if each of them was full of pain. Jason walked through the park. Max pulled on the leash, sniffing everything. He felt a lightness that he hadn't felt in months. The meeting with Emily was unexpected, but it did not hurt him as he expected. He saw her pain, her guilt, but for the first time in a long time, he did not feel anger. He forgave her not for her sake, but for his own sake. He wanted to move on with his life, for his children, for Max, for the person he was becoming. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.